Okay, so the goal for our in-services this year is we're going to try to work on just a handful of skills kind of over and over and over again, build on them each month, and that's why I really hope that it's a priority for you to try to come every month so that we can build on these skills and get better. And that's why I'm filming this for the benefit of anybody who missed any of the in-services this month, because I really want us to, I think that as I've now done, this is my third year being a coordinator, and I've just realized that we really don't start improving on things unless we like practice them over and over and over again. And I've really discovered there's a million things we could talk about in any given lesson that, you know, if you did this or did that or did this, and that'd drive you crazy. If there was just these few, 3 or 4 handful of things that we really improved on, it would take care of 80% of what we're trying to accomplish in seminary. So one of those skills that I would like us to get really good at is what we cutely call summification. And that was the term coined by our area director. It's the combination of summarizing and testifying. And so it's this skill. Let me set up a common scenario in seminary. So you have your opening devotional, or you have at the beginning of your lesson a student that says, before we start, Sister Oakes, can I ask a question? And you're like, sure, anything. And so then they launch into this question that takes about 20 minutes to answer, and all of a sudden you've got half your lesson that's now needs to be chopped, right? So what do? Well, teachers panic sometimes and then try to cram in an hour's worth of a lesson into a 30-minute lesson, which is less effective, right? You can't get very deep on any of that kind of stuff. Or you just get further and further behind by pushing half your lesson onto the next day, and then that means something else gets pushed back, and then the next time there's a question, that gets pushed back, and then that starts to happen. We have flex days for that, so it's not a huge deal. But one thing that would be really important for us to be able to do is to still cover what we're trying to cover while still taking time. Sometimes it may not be a student question. It might be that as you're in your lesson, it just took a little bit longer for the students to grab a hold of that principle and get it to where you needed to be, and so now you have the rest of your lesson is shorter. And so this skill becomes very useful, and I want it to become intuitive. Not just something that you realize, oh, I'm going to have to summarize, but to summarize effectively. And so I'm going to give you a 4-step process that will be very simple, and then we're going to practice it here today. And then I'm going to invite you to try it this week in your lessons, and then give me some feedback by email. So here's how you Summify. Step 1, you announce the block. If everybody has a teacher's manual, does everybody have a teacher's manual, or can you pull it up electronically? In your Book of Mormon teacher's manual, you'll notice that each lesson is blocked up into like 2 or 3 spots. You'll have like 2 or 3 blocks, and they'll have it divided up, and you'll have along with the verses that the block is, there will be a title. So you will state the title for the block, and that's the bolded thing that's right next to the verses, right? And you don't have to get cute about it. You really can just read it straight off your manual. And the reason why is because it does a good job of summarizing all the verses and telling you what to do. Okay. Step 3 then, this is where you get a little bit deeper than just you talking all the time, is you help the students to discover the principle. In most blocks, not always, but in most blocks, there will be a bolded principle in that grouping. And if you are on the fly trying to summify, you go find the verse that principle, which is bolded in the block, is in, and you just grab that verse, and then you ask a question like, would you look for in this verse the principle for this block, and then identify it. And then the step 4 is testify. And that can either come in the form of you just bearing your testimony that you know that that's true, or you asking quickly for a student to, does anybody have an experience with this principle, where you can just give us a quick idea of how that looked in your life. And the whole goal is, though, that you can do this entire process in under 5 minutes. So you don't want to spend a lot of time trying to dig it out of the students. You don't want to, do a ton of time analyzing, maybe just enough to maybe get it before you move on. But that really is the trick. And as we've practiced this in the other two stakes, that's where they kept getting bogged down, is a teacher doesn't realize that they have permission to do something like this in 5 minutes. They just keep feeling like, well, if we're going to talk about it, let's just try to dig it out of students. This is really to get us through a block into another block. And ideally, you wouldn't summify on a block that is really, really important and needs to be talked about. You will do this on a block that you think, well, it's going to be the lesser priority block in the lesson today. Okay? So to show you kind of how this is done, let's pull up a lesson plan. So let's get our Book of Mormon manual out and let's go to 2 Nephi 5. Let's pick a block out of here that would probably be the less important. So the first block is about Laman and Lemuel separating. Nephites live after the manner of happiness is probably the block you're going to spend your time in that lesson. Yeah.
The lesson actually says avoid the mistake of taking too much time on the first part of the lesson and having to rush through the rest of it.
So maybe we should do the first block. All right. Let's pretend the scenario was this. We had a devotional go a little long, or the doctrinal mastery activity you did at the beginning of the lesson was really good, and you had some fruit bear from it. So we're going to do, and I'm doing it on the fly. This is no preparation on my part, but I'm going to treat you like a class, and I'm going to show you how this is done. Okay, you ready? So thank you, Miles, for that really good question that spurred a discussion that went 30 minutes. I really appreciate that. And so now we have a lesson. We're in 2 Nephi 5, if you all turn to there. We're going to need to maybe fly a little bit on the first part so we can spend the bulk of our lesson on the important part. So in 2 Nephi 5, verses 1 through 8, the Lord separates the followers of Nephi from the followers of Laman and Lemuel. And so, all right, let's read verse 5 and 6. And so, Melinda, if you'll read verses 5 and 6, and as she reads that, if you guys would look for a principle that we can take away from this separation of the Nephites from the Lamanites. Go ahead, Melinda.
Of 5 and 6.
Mm-hmm.
And it came to pass that the Lord did warn me that I, Nephi, should depart from them and flee into the wilderness, and all those who would go with me. Wherefore it came to pass that I, Nephi, did take my family, and also Zoram and his family, and Sam, my elder brother, and his family, and Jacob and Joseph, and my younger brethren, and also my sisters, and all those who would go with me. And all those who would go with me were those who believed in the warnings and the revelations of God. Wherefore they did hearken unto my words.
Okay, thank you. So, Sarah, what would you say is a principle from those verses that we can learn from the separation?
Well, one thing that I have written in my notes, actually, among my scriptures,
Okay.
is that sometimes we don't receive the answers to prayers that we expect. I mean, I don't think he expected to have to leave half of his family behind.
So sometimes we're asked to do things we didn't expect.
Yeah.
It's a cool principle. Jonathan, do you have anything else, any other lesson you saw in those verses?
Well, I was add a comment to hers. I've never thought of that, but before this time, Nephi's always been delivered from every single thing. It's like, oh, I was given power to like shake my brother and to get sense into them, and so it's like, nope, they're done for. Just leave them.
That's interesting, huh? Every moment before this, the Lord has told him, keep working with your brothers, and now he's saying, stop working with your brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah, huh? Any other lessons that you see in here? What about particularly in verse 6?
I was going to say, those who believe the revelations of God hearken to his words.
Okay, I love that. Those who believe in God hearken to his words through who?
Prophet.
Yeah. I'm curious if I can come back to you, Sarah. Has there ever been a time in your life when the Lord's asked you to do something through his prophet that you didn't expect to do?
Absolutely.
Can you share it just off the top of your head?
Well, recently, I've received another major calling along with my seminary calling, and that didn't come directly from the prophet, but it came from his called servant in our branch, and it took me a lot of, going back to him to be reaffirmed that, okay, yeah, I can handle both these major callings.
Yeah. So you like Nephi, kind of don't expect it, and you're kind of heading into the wilderness, but you're
Right.
trusting God as you do it.
Right.
Well, I know it's going to turn out great for you, and as we see as we go on through the rest of this chapter, that you're going to see that the Nephites are blessed because they hearken to the Lord. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So how long did that take?
5 minutes.
Was it about 5 minutes? Were we about under 5 minutes? Did you feel like we did good by these verses? That we gave it a good go at it? So, and now we're all set up. We're set up to now go and learn about the manner of happiness, right? That would take place in the rest of the chapter.